Hello, welcome back to the channel. And a few months ago I predicted that Keir Starmer would be Prime Minister, and that, to be honest, wasn't a particularly insightful prediction. Obviously the polls had been showing that for months. But about 3 weeks ago we had the election here in the UK, and as expected Labour won, so Keir Starmer is now our Prime Minister. So this has now given me the opportunity to make this video about what is going to happen with their green agenda. And it seems apt to be making it today on the 26th of July because yesterday Labour released their Great British Energy founding statement. So what I thought I'd do in this video today is have a look at some of the work that they've already been doing and just have a little bit of a discussion about it. So before I go on, if you would like to take one of a second out of the 2.5 billion seconds you're likely to live just to hit the subscribe button, it would be a massive help to the channel. Okay, so Labour are doing a number of things. They've been in power for 3 weeks and they are actually moving at quite a pace. And they've had the King's Speech, which is where the King, during the state opening of Parliament, basically gives a speech about what Labour are setting out to do over their parliamentary term. So they've released a number of policies. So I'm going to come on to Great British Energy at the end of the video because that's probably the most interesting part, and I want you to keep watching till then. But there's been a number of other sort of policies that have been in the news, and therefore I'm going to talk about those first. So first of all, we've got the cap on child benefits, which is limited to 2 children. So I'm not going to go into what the cap actually is because, one, I don't fully understand it, but Martin Lewis, the money saving expert, has got some definitions about that. And also I'm not going to talk about this cap from the point of view of child poverty or economics, just purely from the point of view of the green agenda. So I think it's fairly well known that the worst thing you can possibly do to increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, damage the environment, is to exist. Unfortunately, that's just what we do. As anything exists, uses resources, it uses energy. As far as humans, we use a lot of it. So the question is the 2-child cap, no matter how unfair it is, how much it introduces child poverty and things like that, it can act as a deterrent to people to have children, and therefore it can act as part of the green agenda. The question is whether it is actually a deterrent or not, and that's probably a discussion to have for another day. So it's a controversial argument for the cap of 2 on child benefit, but it does exist and therefore should actually be discussed as well. Secondly, housing. Labour in their manifesto said they're going to build over this parliamentary term, I think, 1.5 million houses in the UK. There is a housing shortage in the UK. Well, there is and there isn't. There are plenty of empty houses in the UK. There is plenty of houses being acting as a second home, which effectively are empty. However, there are very few houses for people to actually move into currently, and in areas where they are needed. So houses do need to be built, but it's important that when the Labour government is removing restrictions on planning for these houses, which is one of the ways that they are going to increase the amount of housing, is that the regulations still have to be sturdy. The houses built have to be energy efficient. They have to have good insulation. And I've said in my previous video, which seems that not many people think about, is that a new house should have a large south-facing roof. That roof should be full of solar panels. It should have a battery. It should have a peak pump. It should have an EV charging point. It should be in a sustainable development. It also should be built in an area which isn't going to cause a huge amount of environmental damage. So, for instance, it shouldn't be built on a floodplain. It shouldn't be built on agricultural land because we still need to grow food rather than import. So there's all these things that need to be taken into consideration. And if they get one part of it wrong, suddenly their target for being carbon neutral in the UK goes out the window. So that's something else for them to consider through this. It's also important to consider how public transport works in that area. Are they just going to plonk a village in the middle of nowhere with the only access being by car, for instance? Okay, so another policy, this was in their manifesto, which I've got a copy of here, and on page 31 of their manifesto they sort of set out and as set out in our automotive sector plan, Labour will support the transition to electric vehicles by accelerating the rollout of charging points, giving certainty to manufacturers by restoring the phase-out date of 2030 for new cars with internal combustion engines, and supporting buyers of the second-hand electric cars by standing the information supplied on the condition of the batteries. Okay, so what this is in relation to is during the Conservative government they announced that there would be a ban on the sales of new internal combustion cars, which are petrol and diesel, in 2030. And then last year they rolled that back to 2035. This caused a lot of confusion in the motor industry. Labour saying they're going to reintroduce the 2030 rule. However, it wasn't in the King's speech, although well, I didn't hear it if it was in there, and I did watch that speech. So this is generally a good thing. Getting more electric cars on the road means that you get less emission from the tailpipes because there's no tailpipe to emit from. Providing that the cars are still produced in methods that are aiming to be carbon neutral, that's going to be important as well, and also taking into account the materials mined for it. Of course, phasing out petrol or diesel will have an impact on the carbon emissions from processing and mining or drilling crude oil. So that's interesting. They say they're going to roll out charging points. They don't say how they're going to do that, whether it's going to be direct government investment, incentivising firms to invest, or, as I would personally prefer them to do, or not just do this, but one of them, a range of measures they can do, they can allow systems like Kerbo, so they can take control of those installations away from councils, which can reject them for whatever reason, either because they're lazy, like Swansea Council, or because they have a different agenda where they want to make money by installing charging hubs and then forcing people with EVs to pay money to the council to charge. But things like the Kerbo system would allow people without driveways to charge from home on cheap electricity, have cheap electricity through the night, say on the Octopus tariff. If you want to sign up to Octopus, here's my referral code. Thank you for those who have already done this. If you would sign up using my code, you get £50, I get £50, so everybody wins. So, as I say, that is probably an ideal solution, which they should be looking at. I'm actually considering writing to Swansea's new MP. So our previous MP, which was a Labour MP, basically got kicked out of the Labour Party in the last parliamentary term. So we've got a new one, a new MP, so he might be a little bit more willing to actually intervene and do some good. So that's another area. And since we started talking about energy, let's get on to the Great British Energy. So, as I say, this was launched yesterday, and there seems to be a number of MPs who are going around on local news channels and discussion shows to talk about this. There does seem to be a little bit of confusion about what it actually is. So last week I watched a discussion, or a clip from a discussion in Parliament. It was Ed Miliband, who I believe is the Business Secretary, but I'm not entirely sure. And it was the Reform Party MP Lee Anderson asking a question. And the question that Lee Anderson put forward was that sometime over the previous years, the Labour Council in Nottingham, I think it was, invested in an energy company called Robin Hood Energy, which then went bust and the government had to bail out at the tune of 50 million. So how does Great British Energy differ from that? And as Ed Miliband pointed out, which I'd hope that other MPs had realised, is that British Energy is not an energy retailer. It doesn't sell energy direct to the customer. You will still have to go through something like Octopus, Scottish Power, British Gas, E.ON, EDF, Bulb, if that still exists, to get your electricity. So what British Energy is, it's an energy generator. And I'm not entirely sure how it plans to work for this, because part of the outcome that the government is saying is that Great British Energy will drive down bills in Britain. So I typed that into Google. How will British Energy bring down the prices? And effectively they're saying that by investing in renewable green technologies in Britain, such as solar farms, wind farms and nuclear, this will make us less reliant on the price of gas, which with things like the war in Ukraine has pushed up the price of electricity. So I'm not convinced that this will bring down prices to the level that they're saying, largely because they could already decouple the price of electricity from the gas price if they wanted to bring down those high electricity bills. But also, they would then have to, as an energy generator, you sell that to the energy retailers, and the energy retailers then set the price that they're going to sell for. Obviously, there is the off-gen price cap, which the government might have control of, so that might see some slight prices, but it's not an ideal method. But as far as the actual idea of energy generation is concerned, it actually sounds like it's quite a good idea. So it'll be interesting to see what role Great British Energy will take. So in the interviews I've watched, you've had people talking about the Crown Estate, which owns the seabed around Britain, and how that's going to help with Great British Energy and the Crown Estate working together. That's going to facilitate the building of offshore wind farms. We should also say that Labour has also removed the ban on building onshore wind as well, which was introduced, I think, during the Cameron government. So this is the website for Great British Energy, and it says Britain already has public ownership of energy just by foreign governments. So I think Norway and France have invested in things like wind farms in the UK, so any profit goes to the Norwegian or French government, respectively. So the idea is that if British firms or the British government invest, then instead of sending money out of the UK, which is basically an import, then the British government can make money and reinvest that money back into green tech. So they say a first step of the Labour government will be to set up a new publicly owned champion, Great British Energy, which will be owned by the British people, i.e. the government. It will have its headquarters in Scotland and invest in clean energy across the country. So, and make the UK a world leader in floating offshore wind, nuclear power and hydrogen. Then they talk about what they're going to deliver, and then they have a few quotes from some people about what they expect from Great British Energy. So they also talk about their three initial priorities. So it would be co-investing in technology. So they're going to work with other companies and investors to invest in certain projects like wind farms. They're going to scale up and accelerate mature technologies. And they're also going to scale up the community energy. So they're going to partner with energy companies, local authorities and cooperatives to develop small-scale and medium-scale community energy projects. So they're going to be working with local communities as well as on a national scale as well. Part of their job as well, other than just investing, is to also act as a facilitator so that they can communicate with government planning, negotiate with things like the National Grid to get hookups, because that's one of the main problems that Octopus has. They are ready to invest in a wind farm, I think up north of Manchester way, and a solar farm. However, the National Grid can't connect them up until sometime in the 2030s. I think it's 2037. So this company will also try to accelerate that, and also because the government is also investing, it takes a little bit of risk out of people who want to invest as well, because it's going to have that backing and government support. We can also go on the gov.uk website and see the founding statement. So you have the forward. So here is Ed Miliband. So he's not the business secretary. He is the Secretary for State of Energy Security and Net Zero. And we can go all the way through this about just giving out the general background of the project, who the chair of this project is. So it's going to be set up as almost an independent company with his own board. They set out the case for it and who's going to be in charge of it, and also its independence and energy independence and job creation, supporting the bill payers. So this is all in this document. They also talk a bit about the structure, so the project investment and ownership, so who will own these projects when they come through, how these projects will be developed and what scale those are, who they're going to work with. They also talk about Great British Nuclear. So nuclear is a green energy, and it does produce huge amounts of energy, but also takes a huge amount of money to build a nuclear power station and takes a long time to do it. Whether this is a particularly good investment at the moment, who knows? I would personally prefer them to stick with solar, wind, and also offshore tidal energy. So trying to invest in something like the Swansea Tidal Lagoon, and there's another one up Liverpool Way as well, which wants investment. This could all go towards that, because the current nuclear power station, which was meant to be already up and operational, is already over 10 billion over budget and won't be ready for for many years to come. And then you've also got the problems in the future of decommissioning as well. So part of Great British Energy is going to be liaising with Great British Nuclear about how their plans can come together. So it's going to be an exciting time. It'll be interesting to watch how these developments come through. It'll also be interesting to see if any money is made available from the government for extra research and more research grants, and how that's going to be distributed. Mainly hopefully to universities, but also companies as well, which will create jobs and also gain expertise in the country as well. So, a bit of a ramble, but hopefully you found it interesting. Thank you for watching. As I say, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in another video very soon.